I never thought the end would come so suddenly. One moment, I was sitting in my chair, watching the evening news roll across the screen, hearing the world grow darker by the day, politicians lying, families falling apart, America slipping further from the country we once knew. The next moment, my chest tightened like a vice, and before I could call for help, I was gone. My breath stopped, my heart failed, and I was swept out of this world faster than I could cry out. Darkness fell first heavy, suffocating, a silence that made me tremble. And then, in the midst of that silence, I heard voices crying, not around me, but deep within the eternity I had just stepped into. They were the cries of women, of children, voices broken and trembling, pleading for justice. My knees grew weak as I realized they were the victims, the ones the world ignored, mocked, or silenced. I had heard their names in headlines, seen their faces pass by, and like so many, I thought, are they telling the truth? Some even called them liars. And now, here they were, standing before the throne of eternity, their tears gathered like evidence. I was pulled forward into a light that pierced every excuse, every thought, every justification I had ever spoken in my life. And standing there was no politician, no judge of this earth, no lawyer to spin words, only Christ himself, seated upon a throne brighter than 1,000 suns, yet terrifying in his holiness. His eyes were fire, his presence like thunder rolling across the universe, and every soul, every single one, stood silent in his gaze. Then his voice shook me to my bones. You defended power, but I defend the broken. You ignored truth, but my word is truth. I fell to my knees, trembling like a soldier who had just seen the battlefield of the soul. I thought of the church hymns of my youth, just as I am without one plea, and suddenly those words weren't about walking an aisle. They were about standing exposed before the God who sees everything. As I knelt there, the scene around me shifted into something I can only describe as a courtroom, not the kind we've seen on TV with polished wood and sharp-suited lawyers, but a heavenly tribunal where no lie could stand and no excuse could survive. Angels stood like witnesses on either side, their faces solemn, their robes pure white, their eyes fixed on the judge who sat enthroned above all. Before him were scrolls, countless scrolls, each one unrolling with names, deeds, and words written in blazing letters of light. The cries of the victims I had heard before echoed through the chambers, their voices not of accusation, but of pleading for truth to finally be honored. And there, in front of them, stood the men who had mocked, silenced, and denied their pain. Their mouths opened, but no defense came forth. Every arrogant word they had once spoken echoed back against them like chains rattling in the silence. I could not look away, though my soul trembled. For the judge spoke again, his voice cutting sharper than any earthly gavel. The world may ignore the broken, but I do not. The powerful may call them liars, but I am the truth, and my justice does not delay. It hit me then. This was not just about Epstein, not just about his victims. It was about every time we, as a nation, had turned away from the weak. Every time we shrugged at evil because it was easier than facing the cost of truth. My heart ached with the realization that America, the land we once sang about with pride, was on trial too. The God of heaven does not wink at sin, nor does he forget the cries of those trampled underfoot. I wept, my whole body shaking, remembering the days I had dismissed stories, brushed past headlines, or thought to myself, that's not my problem. But in eternity, I saw that every ignored cry, every silenced victim, was a case presented before the judge who misses nothing. Then it happened, the moment that nearly broke me in two. Jesus turned his gaze from the courtroom toward me. His eyes, blazing like living fire, pierced through every layer of my soul. In an instant, I saw my entire life, not as I had told it, not as I had justified it, but as it truly was. My words, my thoughts, my dismissals, my pride, all laid bare in that searing light. I wanted to cry out, "Lord, I believed in you. I went to church. I sang the hymns. I voted the right way. I stood for what was good in America." But before the words could leave my lips, I realized they were nothing more than excuses, paper thin before His holiness. Jesus spoke, and His words cut me deeper than any sword. "You loved your nation's pride more than my people's pain. You defended your politics more than the powerless. You called yourself righteous, but you ignored the cries of the broken I sent to test your heart." I shook where I stood. Tears streamed down my face as memories came flooding back. Times when I had scoffed at someone's story, times when I shook my head and said, "They just want attention." I thought of the veterans I ignored because their pain made me uncomfortable. I thought of the abused who I dismissed because believing them cost too much. And I felt the weight of it all pressing on me like chains. This was no longer about Epstein, no longer about his victims. It was about me. My heart was on trial. My excuses were gone. Standing before the judge of eternity, I was stripped of every mask I had ever worn. All that was left was the truth. As I wept before Him, the scene widened. It was no longer just me, no longer just individuals standing trial. I saw a nation, our America, spread out like a tapestry beneath the throne. I saw her past. When church bells rang through small towns on Sunday mornings, when families bowed their heads over dinner tables, when faith and patriotism were braided together like the flag and the cross. And then I saw her present, confused, broken, mocking the very values that once gave her strength. Jesus lifted His hand, and with that simple motion the scrolls opened wider. What I saw made me tremble. The cries of the innocent were not only the voices of Epstein's victims. They were the unborn, silenced before they ever breathed. They were the children abused in homes no one dared investigate. They were the elderly forgotten in hospitals. They were the broken souls, mocked by a culture too busy and too proud to care. Every cry reached heaven. Not one was missed. His voice thundered. America has defended the powerful, excused the corrupt, and mocked the hurting. You cannot wave the flag and ignore the cross. You cannot call yourselves free while silencing the broken. It is a prose from Aiden's. It was as if he was saying directly to me and to every one of us who grew up believing this country was a light on a hill. The light has dimmed because we turned our eyes away from Him who is the true light. And I realized with shaking knees that this judgment was not abstract. It was personal. Each of us, each church, each community had a role in either standing with the broken or siding with silence. The America I loved, the one I fought for in words, was under the eyes of a judge who cannot be deceived. And His verdict was clear. What you do to the least of these, you do to me. As His words rolled like thunder, I was shown what happens to those who harden their hearts, those who mock the cries of the broken and cling to their power, pride, and sin. It was not an image I will ever forget. I saw men who once strutted through this world with money in their pockets and arrogance on their lips now cowering in chains of fire. They were the ones who laughed at the testimonies of the weak, who silenced victims with money or intimidation, who shrugged at evil because it benefited them. Their mouths, which once called others liars, were now silenced. Their eyes, which once looked with lust and contempt, were filled with terror. No lawyers, no excuses, no spin, only judgment. And I heard Jesus' voice thunder across eternity. You called them liars. I call them mine. You trampled on their pain. I will trample your pride. You chose darkness over light. And now, darkness is your reward. The sight shook me to the core. These were not just strangers, they were men I had once defended in casual conversation, men I had excused because I thought the media exaggerates. And now they stood condemned by the only judge who cannot be bribed or deceived. My soul trembled. I thought of my generation, us, boomers, who grew up with the hymns, who pledged allegiance with hand over heart, who once believed right and wrong were clear. Somewhere along the way, we had let convenience soften our conviction. We wanted comfort more than courage, and here, in the afterlife, there was no room left for excuses. Eternity does not bend to politics or pride. I cried out within myself, "Lord, have mercy on me," because I knew, if not for His grace, I too deserved the fate I was witnessing. As I trembled, overwhelmed by what I had seen, I expected the fire to swallow me too. I had defended the proud, ignored the broken, and lived too often in the comfort of my own excuses. My knees buckled, and I cried out like a desperate child, "Lord, I have no defense. I am guilty." For a moment, silence hung heavy, and then Jesus stepped down from His throne. The brightness of His robe blinded me, yet His nearness was not crushing, it was overwhelming love. He placed His hand upon my shoulder, and every chain of shame melted like wax in the fire. Tears streamed down my face as His voice, gentler now, but still piercing, spoke. "Yes, you are guilty, but I paid your debt. Do not return the same. Go and warn them before it is too late." I sobbed openly, like a child who had just been spared from a punishment he knew he deserved. And I remembered the old hymn from my childhood pews, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." Never had those words felt so real. Grace wasn't a theory, it was a lifeline thrown to me at the very edge of judgment. But His mercy came with a command. His eyes, still burning with truth, locked on mine. "Speak for the broken. Stand with the wounded. Do not defend the proud." America is crumbling because my people love their comfort more than justice. Go and wake them. I felt the weight of that calling press into my chest, more powerful than the fear of death itself. He had spared me not just for my sake, but to sound the trumpet for a generation too close to falling asleep at the wheel of eternity. After speaking His words of mercy, Jesus turned my eyes back toward those who had once been trampled. I saw their faces, not blurred headlines, not courtroom sketches, but real men and women, real children who had grown up carrying wounds this world refused to acknowledge. Some were Epstein's victims, yes, but many were others, faces we will never see on television. Neighbors whose cries were ignored, children from broken homes, women silenced by shame, veterans haunted by memories nobody wanted to hear. Their faces glowed not with shame, but with a dignity heaven had restored to them. Jesus lifted His hand toward them, and His voice thundered with both tenderness and fury. "These are mine. I never turned away their cries. I never called them liars. I never forgot their tears. Woe to those who mock the wounded, for in mocking them, they mocked me." The weight of His words nearly drove me into the ground. I thought of how often, as a boomer generation, we valued strength, toughness, and grit, and how easily that pride made us dismiss the weak as complainers or attention seekers. But standing in eternity, I saw the truth. The measure of a nation, the measure of a man, is not in how it treats the strong, but in how it treats the broken. And then His eyes fixed on me again. "Go back and tell them. Tell the elders of America that their time is short. Tell them that the flag cannot cover sin, that their hymns mean nothing if their hearts ignore the cries of the hurting. Tell them I am coming and I will judge rightly." At that moment, I knew this was not just a vision for me. It was a mission for every elder, every believer, every patriot. still breathing in the land I love. The light around me grew fierce, and I felt my soul being pulled back toward my body. I cried out, "Lord, please, don't let me forget this. Don't let me go back unchanged." His final words thundered in my ears, etched into my very spirit. "Do not call liars what I call precious. Do not defend the powerful while forsaking the powerless. My justice is coming. Warn them before it is too late." And then, just as suddenly as I had left, I opened my eyes. I was gasping, trembling, soaked in sweat. My family's voices sounded distant as I lay there in the living room, but all I could think of was the courtroom of eternity and the gaze of the judge who misses nothing. I wept like a child, clinging to the Bible on the shelf that I had so often read casually but never truly heard. My friends, I am telling you this with tears in my eyes. We cannot go back to ignoring the cries of the broken. We cannot wave the American flag and forget the cross of Christ. We cannot keep dismissing victims as liars because it's easier for our pride. We, the generation that once filled the pews, that once sang onward Christian soldiers with conviction, must rise again not in politics or pride, but in repentance and truth. I came back changed. My pride was exposed. My excuses burned away. But mercy gave me a second chance, and I will not waste it. Neither should you. If you hear my voice today, take it as a trumpet call. Turn back to Christ. Defend the broken. Humble yourselves, and prepare for the day when every hidden thing will be brought to light. Because Jesus told me himself, the judge who never ignores the broken is already standing at the door.